Another way to look at solid principles is from the angle of some articles you can find online criticizing solid. And people come up with their own abbreviations or their own definitions or redefinitions of solid principles, and I want to show a few of them. One of them is solid renamed to shoc, with a lot of long article of explaining why solid is wrong, but the main thing in this article is about solid being too old. And if I zoom it in a bit more, solid design principles became kind of like on most of the CVs or job ads or anywhere where you mention like senior development, solid is the key. But the solid actually needs updating because they were defined, all those principles, believe it or not, 50 years ago, with the languages and the software in mind that it was back then. In modern principles, in modern software design, we can talk about the same principles but in a bit different language. You could argue it's roughly the same things, just rephrased differently with different abbreviation, but some details are quite interesting. For example, single responsibility is about doing one job. So what is one job exactly? And another statement that this article makes about open-closed principle. Initially, this principle was stated at the time when it took a lot of time to build and test the code. Computers were slower and we had to rebuild classes if you modify them. That's why it was beneficial to build to the interface and not change that interface or parent class anytime. You just add a new class and you compile just that. In modern technology, it doesn't make that much sense anymore. Or at least it doesn't give that benefit of what were people thinking at the time of building those principles. So shoc abbreviation is the way of that author to describe his train of thought, and you can read that article. I will leave the link in the description of this video. And another one that I can show you is the cupid by another person criticizing solid, and he's criticizing every single element of solid. I think he's overstating with a lot of questionable examples, but he's asking quite a lot of good questions. So, for example, I will zoom in a bit. Write simple code is the principle behind solid, but what does simple even mean? And then, for example, single responsibility principle says that it's one reason to change or only do one thing. Again, what is one thing? If it's processing something, extracting, transforming, and loading, is it one thing or several things? It's quite vague, right? So he's suggesting the idea of one thing or one job that fits in my head. One concept that you can discuss and reason about it. I think is quite a good way to phrase that. Also, he's mentioning the same thing about open-closed principle, that it was introduced when it was expensive to change the classes. So nowadays, as this author says, the advice, if you need to change the code, change the code. It's not that expensive anymore in terms of compilation time or just general architecture. And again, I will link this article in the description below this video and you can read it in fully. But generally what I wanted to say is that you can find quite a lot of criticism of solid principles because they were created back in the day and it doesn't apply that strictly anymore to modern software development. So choose your own opinion and how to apply it to your projects. Solid is not the sacred set of rules, and the architecture of any project is more like art than science, in my opinion.